vitamins and other nutrients from your food, then that's a very limiting factor. Or David Winston likes to say, you are what you don't excrete, meaning if you have a backed up system and all that waste stays in your body, that could be a not good thing as well. So it's just incredible how many people in our society constantly live with impaired digestion. Working with clients, I'll often see the digestion as the main cause of their problems, but people have lived with this impaired digestion for so long that they think that heartburn's normal or constipation's normal. So it can be a big source of when working with people to help them. Some examples, belching, flatulence or gas, nausea, bloating, loose stools, constipation, insufficient digestive enzymes, ulcers, heartburn, and the list could probably include a few more there. So these are all big. When I see this with someone, I definitely raises my eyebrows because I think because healthy digestion is such an important part of overall health, we always have.
Yeah, learning to use spices is one of the ways to improve your digestion of almost anything. For instance, the Chinese five spice formula is a very good one. You can buy that a lot already pre-made in many stores. But putting a number of spices together is like one of the secrets that's used in Indian cooking, and it works wonders. And it's also used in Middle Eastern cooking. And learning how to use those, I think, will help digestion tremendously.
Absolutely, and what a fun way to get your medicine too, I think.
Absolutely.
Um, so
The
exercise, we.
problem with that actually is that most people hardly use enough. When you actually
Mhm.
look at how these spices are used, like asafoetida is a great one. It's like a quarter to half a teaspoon of the stuff, and same thing with cinnamon and cloves and ginger. Like a half a teaspoon of ginger. Uh, when you put all those spices together, you actually have quite a bit of medicine there that really enhances digestion tremendously.
Absolutely. Um, all right, so exercise. We all know exercise is incredibly important. Um, and I think it's important to come up with good ways about talking about that with our clients because some of this stuff becomes just white noise. Everybody knows it, but how many people actually put it into practice? But specifically, exercise is really important for immune system health because it increases the cardiovascular system, which then helps deliver nutrients to cells, also eliminates naturally occurring metabolic waste such as carbon dioxide. It's crucial for lymphatic health. The lymph system doesn't have a heart the way our cardiovascular system does. It actually relies on our physical exercise in order to keep our lymph moving well, and of course, lymphatics being a very important part of the immune system. And then, of course, there's all those other benefits like feeling great and improved mental well-being and a decreased risk of diabetes. This is one of my favorite things for the immune system, something I believe in strongly since I live in the middle of nowhere in the forest. But spending time in nature can actually has been scientifically proven to improve our immune system. Japan is one of the countries that have put a lot of money into studying the effects of nature on the immune system, and they actually promote forest therapy now. So wouldn't that be great if you went to your doctor and your doctor says, what you need is some forest therapy? Hygiene theory. So the hygiene hypothesis, it states that basically it states we are too clean and living in too pure of an environment, but basically a lack of early childhood exposure to different infectious agents increases the susceptibility to allergic diseases by suppressing natural development of the immune system. So basically, if the body never has the ability, or the opportunity, I should say, to develop through fighting off various pathogens, then it'll be basically handicapped for the rest of its life. So, this idea of like the sphere of dirt, excessive hand washing might actually be killing us. Another way of saying that is what doesn't kill you makes you stronger for reals.
Right.
Here's a variety of studies, and there are so many studies about this. Go ahead, Michael.
No, I believe
Michael,
that
did you?
very strongly. I think that people need to get out and spend a little more time with Tierra of the dirt.
And so here's some various studies that have been done, basically all showing that people who grow up with more exposure to these things, such as people growing on farms, etc., had decreased incidence of immune dysfunction later in life. So the hygiene theory, you can look it up and read more about it, um, and how important it is. So important things about this is again the hygiene theory and how to promote healthy gut flora is of course let children and adults play in the dirt. Eat a range of fermented foods. That can be anything from your sauerkrauts and kimchis to yogurts if you tolerate dairy, misos. Eat vegetables straight out of the garden and don't, bleach them before you eat them.
Right.
And basically, we need to really look at, when sanitation is absolutely necessary and when we're going a little bit overboard. So, if I was going in for open heart surgery, I would definitely want every single possible sanitation measure to be taken into account. But spraying every surface with Lysol in our homes is probably not necessary. And that's my personal opinion there.
Yeah, and don't use antibiotic soaps.
Another way to do that. Right, that's a very important one. Thanks for mentioning that, Michael. Appropriate hand washing is using non-antibacterial soaps and washing your hands for 30 seconds, making sure to get the wrists and the back of the hands as well as in between the fingers. And that will, and when you do need to have clean hands, that's a great way to do it and avoid those antibacterial soaps, not only because they've been implicated in creating things like MRSA, but also because a lot of those have hormone disruptors within them as well, which can cause another source of troubles. So again, on healthy gut flora, consuming prebiotics, which prebiotics instead of probiotics. Prebiotics are basically food for healthy gut flora. So these are foods that are high in inulin, includes things like artichokes, burdock root, and also elecampane, although it's hard to eat a lot of elecampane just because it's so bitter and pungent. But those all contain a lot of inulin. So if someone is needing to replenish their healthy gut bacteria post antibiotics or just because it's something that's necessary in their lives, and if they're going to buy expensive products or eat a lot of fermented food, then I recommend that they use prebiotics alongside it. I also recommend what I call loading doses of probiotics following antibiotics, and it's important to get good products with that. But basically, if the bottle says take 1 pill a day, I recommend, taking 3 to 5 pills a day. So you're getting a lot in there, but also taking the prebiotics at the same time. Healthy foods. So, we could definitely get into a long debate about that. One person's food is definitely another person's poison, and we could debate all day long about paleo versus vegan versus acid alkaline. The way we eat is both a personal choice and a spiritual choice, and but I really recommend that people find out what works for them and what doesn't work for them, and not just jump onto dietary fads. And a book that I often recommend to help people do this is called Metabolic Typing by William Walcott, who actually just happens to live in the town over from me. He's like 15 minutes away, but that's total coincidence. And what I like about this book is he doesn't tell people how to eat. He tells people how to recognize when foods work for you and how to recognize when foods don't work for you. And people going through this, I mean, it's just a paperback book that you can buy for $5 or whatever. And if a couple goes through it, they might find that one person needs to eat differently than the other person. When I say eat differently, I'm just talking about the different proportions of carbohydrates to protein to fats. But of course, beyond controversy, we can agree that fresh, local, and organic is great, that avoiding processed foods and sugar, excess sugar, we'll talk about sugar in a moment, and increasing omega-3s is good. And I realize I'm going through this fast, but I'm assuming a lot of you know this, but it is important to note. So, of course, walking the perimeter of the grocery store, visiting farmers market, basically eating food and not packages. So sugar. I am very unpopular when I talk about sugar because I have a pretty hardcore approach to it. I think the overconsumption of sugar is leading to so many health problems in this country, such as insulin resistance, which leads to diabetes, which well, I'll just leave that aside. But in terms of our immune system, the overconsumption of sugar does depress the immune system, and I think it's interesting we don't really know what a safe amount of sugar is in terms of daily consumption. And people often ask me that. They'll say, like, well, what about just one cookie a day? And, historically, we never ate even that much sugar a day. So it is something that to think about. But one thing that we wanted to mention is that when we talk about sugar being unhealthy, um, we are talking about the daily consumption of sugar being unhealthy. And Michael, do you want to jump in about sugar as a medicinal
Yeah,
preparation?
yeah. Everything is relative in life, and sugar generally is not is basically something that's extracted from a food source. But if you have to choose a truly raw sugar, like sucanat, because refined sugar and even brown sugar when you buy it in the store is basically refined sugar where they just add a little coloring of molasses. But what's missing from sugar is basically the minerals, and it's the minerals that give color and texture to the whole thing. And so eating raw sugar, uh, in my opinion, is the preferable thing to do. And generally, by doing that, you probably wouldn't eat as much as you would as if you eating white sugar, because whenever you eat something that's refined and processed, you're always going to want more because you're never satisfied, because your body, even though your head doesn't think that anything's missing, your body does. So it goes looking for all the minerals that should have been present in the white sugar stuff that you ate, and it doesn't find it. So you just eat more of that, hoping that you find it, and you don't. So if you eat whole you know sugar like sucanat, I think it's a lot healthier for you. The other thing is that sugar has a role in medicine, and later on we're going to be talking about some Ayurvedic formulas and Western herbal formulas that actually use sugar to make a syrup. And in that function, it's got a very limited use, and in that it actually helps to liquefy mucus and break it up, so that uh, by attracting the mucus and the pathogens in the body, then the herbs are able to go at it and destroy these things. So basically, you're sort of baiting the pathogens in your body by giving it sugar with herbs in the formulas that we're going to present later. There's an interesting cancer method that I learned recently that is really interesting, which is a whole system. And I understand there's a clinic that's doing this, where they actually lower people's blood sugar, and then they feed them small amounts of sugar, or along with small amounts. They feed them sugar with chemotherapy, using the sugar to bait the cancer, because cancer eats sugar, and then you don't have to take as much chemotherapy, because chemotherapy goes after it. That's basically the way herbalists use sugar. It's very interesting, and they're having very good results treating cancer that way. But when you're just eating sugar all the time as part of your diet, and my God, you go into the store, you can't find anything that's in a package that doesn't have added sugar. So avoid that stuff like a plague. It is a plague.
Yeah, I like to call it a cultural catastrophe. And I
Yeah,
work with a lot of families, and what I recommend is, it's really hard to limit our sugar consumption when we're constantly being diluted with it within our families.
it
You
really
go
is.
to special events and everything centers around sugar. You go to a
Exactly.
wedding, it's all about the cake. You have Halloween, it's all about the candy, or even Easter, or Thanksgiving, it's about the pie. It just goes on and on and on.
I know.
And I think we need to make decisions within our own immediate families and bring those decisions within the greater family of removing our focus on sugar and creating celebrations and a life that is really fun and has great rewards in it, that's not focused around this cultural catastrophe of sugar. All right, vitamin D3. KP likes Carter Perkins Kalsa likes to call it the nutritional breakthrough of the 21st century, and it is crucial for immune system health. How it works is it basically activates the immune system. You can think of it as a watchdog. If you have low vitamin D, your watchdog is just sleeping away and letting everything come in. Vitamin D3 deficiency is strongly associated with all sorts of immune system dysfunction, from frequent colds and flus to allergies to cancer. what I recommend for people, and pretty much every person I work with, I have them get tested for their vitamin D3. And then, if it's possible for them, do appropriate sun exposure, which is getting some good rays of sunshine when the sun is 45 degrees higher in the sky. But you need a lot of sun exposure, like just your hands and feet aren't going to cut it. You need practically full body exposure. And when I say that, it's important to note that burning is never okay. People often get freaked out. Oh, no, I can't go out in the sun without sunscreen. But yes, you can, but just never get burned. So people have to work up to that, make sure that they don't get burned. Uh, Supplementation can be a part of that as well. Then I recommend whatever someone does, then they get tested again so that they know that it worked. And I have never seen someone come back with a normal vitamin D test yet. So Western labs, they'll say that 30 to 100 is a normal level for vitamin D. So I'll have people who come to me with severe symptoms that could be directly correlated to vitamin D3 deficiency, and they'll say, oh, within normal limits. I'm at 31. But I like to see people closer to 80. I get that number from both my mentor KP, also the Vitamin D Council, which is a great source of information, and also because when I see people get up to those levels, their symptoms improve. Right, sleeping well, of course, is so important. Sleep deprivation can lead to poor immune system health. It can lead to insulin resistance, and on and on. But it's crazy to me how many adults in our culture just don't get enough sleep. It's
Yeah.
just amazing. So that's again another way that we can be really helpful and supportive to our own clientele is helping understand why a person isn't getting enough restful and plentiful sleep. It may be that they just don't prioritize that. They don't want that in their life, which might need, you can help educate them on that if they're open. They might have some kind of insomnia due to nutrient deficiency, or maybe their sympathetic nervous system is just on edge. Maybe they have children that are keeping them up all night because they're coughing with whooping cough. They can have inappropriate caffeine consumption or just poor sleep habits. So any one of those, nutrient deficiency as well. So
Yeah,
addressing that with people,
yeah.
helping them with that.
I recently read a book about sleep, and it's very interesting that historically, the idea that somebody would sleep a straight 8 hours without a break is not necessarily true. Even back in ancient Greek and Roman times, there was a an idea of the first sleep and the second sleep. And throughout the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, all the way up to the Industrial Age in the 1900s, people oftentimes had broken sleep in the middle of the night because, well, obviously, if you go to bed and you have a long night, like 15 hours of darkness, you're not going to stay asleep and you don't have electricity to turn things on. So, if you happen to be one of those that wakes up in the middle of the night, you don't need to think that you have insomnia. You just might be one of those people like the paleo diet folks, who have their particular nutritional needs, who are not necessarily geared towards sleeping straight through. And you need a little break. You get up and you do something, and then but you have to make sure you go back to bed. You need at least 8 hours sleep a day total.
Yeah, and just the key being there, you wake up feeling good.
Right.
Um, so detoxification, just mentioning it briefly. Um, you know, I I strongly believe in individual detoxification. So not this idea that we're all dirty and we all need to generally detoxify, but basically looking for
You say we're
inherent
all dirty?
lifestyle deficiencies. Yeah.
You didn't say that.
Uh,
I beg your
no,
pardon.
yeah. Well, some people feel that way about detoxification. They need to cleanse themselves or purify themselves. But we have this amazing systems within our body to help naturally get rid of metabolic waste within our body, such as liver, kidneys, lungs, skins, intestines. But any of those can become hampered. So looking at an individual, making sure, for example, that their bowels are moving regularly, that their liver is functioning appropriately,
And
etc.
Just like the
This is
Chinese
how
are
I visually think of detox.
right. Just like the Chinese are haunted by Confucius, Americans are haunted by the Puritans. The philosophy
Exactly. It still shows up. So this is how I visually think about detoxification. It's basically on the left-hand side there you see, this murky, stagnant pond that's all backed up. And that basically, if our systems of elimination aren't working well, that can be a factor. But ideally, our bodies can just be on this right-hand side picture, which is just free-flowing creek. And when our body is working well, then that's um, a visual representation of detoxification. Things are working well.
Right.
Of course, environmental pollutants are a big one, and that's something another much larger conversation about it. And I've definitely seen people go off the deep end, getting really concerned about them. And I admit that they are a big concern, but at the same time, we need to balance between avoiding things and also supporting systems of elimination. Stress, this is another one. It's just white noise. We all know that stress is bad, but I bet if I let's see, how many people are on here tonight? 180 people. I bet if I asked you to raise your hand and tell me, how many of you are stressed, I bet a majority of you would do it. So hopefully not. Hopefully we're all herbalists and we know better, right? But it's just everyone here is stressed, and it is a really serious problem because stress can make any disease or any health problem um, that much more problematic. So I think we need to have a serious conversation with our culture concerning stress, and just I feel like people are just, oh, I'm stressed, but you know how life is. That's just how it is. And I don't think that necessarily is how it has to be. But I went down to Mexico earlier this year. My dad lives there, so I went to go visit him. And after about a week there, I was just really amazed and looking around at all of our interactions. And I just said to my dad, I said, I just haven't seen one person here who's stressed. And and my dad said, yeah, I've never heard anybody complain of being stressed or, um, say that, it's just never, there's never been anyone complaining of that at all. And I've never seen that. And I said, well, but the thing is, like, people here have really hard lives and they're starving. And, it's not, it's sometimes it's very difficult to see people down there and just the struggles that they're going through. And my dad says, he says, yeah, some people here are hungry, but they're not stressed. That was just such an interesting concept to me. I think anything we do, we tack on stress to it. And just down there in my limited Gringa experience, it was just pretty amazing to me to see this, as a society or as a whole, this kind of non-stressed environment. Yeah, isn't that nice? That just makes me feel good just looking at it. And it's a beautiful hammock on the ocean. And so what I recommend is that, I just feel like people really love to talk about how stressed they are. And something I've started doing is I'm just talking about how not stressed I am with my friends, and say, how was your day? Oh, it was good. I took a really long lunch break. We set up the hammock, laid in the hammock, and swung in the sun for a while. So just be that example and just change our relationship with stress, and live the life we want to, without letting stress consistently take a big role in it. All right, psychoneuroimmunology. I practiced that several times today. It looks like I did it. So
Good
basically,
job.
this is
Good
looking
job.
at the interaction between the nervous. Thank you, Michael. This is a looks at the interaction between the nervous system and the immune system. This is, I probably don't have to tell you this, but how we feel emotionally actually does directly correspond to our health. And it took Candace Pert. She wrote a book, says everything you need to know to feel good, or God, however you read that. Um, and she is a scientist, completely, Western medicine scientist, and she essentially proved that through science that our emotions directly affect our immune system. So lots of interesting work on that. All right, so we're moving to the end of this basics of, foundations of health, and I wanted to use this quote here by David Hoffman because it really emphasizes why I put you all through that. And basically, he says herbal medicine is as limited as orthodox medicine if it is used only to affect T and B lymphocyte function without the benefit of a broader holistic context. So that's one place that we can really shine. And I stole this image from Balanced Bites. I'll give them credit there. But basically, I'll have people come to see me, and let's say they have some type of immune system dysfunction, like they get frequent colds and flus or they have allergies, and they'll say, what herb is good for that? Meanwhile, this is what they look like. They don't get enough exercise, they smoke, they have all the psychological stress, they have nutrient poor food, they have financial pressures, they have all these things going on in their life, and which are really the underlying problem. So again, when we talk about holistic perspectives, this I think is where a lot of our juice can come from. Um, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. So immunomodulators, we're still talking a little bit here about prevention, or at least supporting the immune system. So immunomodulators, these are herbs that are balancing herbs. They're really deep immune system tonics. So they're generally very mild in action. They can be very mild energetically. They gently build and support the immune system. Most of them are taken long term. It's not something you just take one day and then end with it. And generally, these are for people who have symptoms of deficiency. And I'm just going to mention a couple here, just as examples. Codonopsis is one of my favorites. This is the vine you see growing there is Codonopsis, and that was taken in my garden last year. It's a beautiful plant.
Wow.
So I often combine Codonopsis with astragalus to strengthen the lungs. I learned that from herbalist Matthew Becker. It's great for people with frequent pneumonia or seasonal allergies that affect the lungs. Michael Tierra taught me that it's sometimes called poor man's ginseng, and used similarly to ginseng as an adaptogen, but energetically it's not as stimulating or hot
Right.
in nature, and you also typically use a lot more of it than you would. So it could be 10 to 30 grams decocted into foods or chai. It has a sweet, mild taste. It's actually quite pleasant, I think.
This is one of this one and astragalus that we're going to talk about later are herbs to buy and have in your cupboard by the pound, so you can throw them into soups and things like that when you're making them,
Absolutely.
and also breakfast cereal.
Absolutely. I was just telling Michael that just my husband and I alone go through 8 to 10 pounds of this a year, just on our own. So this is long-term acting immunomodulator. It's really famous because a lot of studies have been done on it showing that it increases white blood cell count during chemotherapy. But I mean, we could spend a whole hour and a half just talking about astragalus and all it does. It's cardioprotective, hepatoprotective. In Chinese medicine, it's considered specifically to be a spleen qi tonic. It has the general term adaptogen to it as well.
Which means that it raises
So I
metabolism.
usually recommend it.
Spleen
Raises
cheat.
metabolism. Yeah,
Yeah.
we could go.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I'll typically recommend it for people who have allergies, frequent colds and flus, fatigue, cancer prevention, and during chemotherapy, like we talked. This is another one of those huge dosage herbs, doses anywhere from 10 to 100 grams, although 100 is pretty extreme. I dose anywhere in the 10 to 30 gram range. And because it's such a high dose herb, decoctions and powders are best for that. And it's one that you don't expect miracles overnight, but take it over the long term. Michael, you want to talk about astragalus jade screen?
Yeah, astragalus jade screen. In the jade stone in Chinese medicine is considered to be very sacred, uh, and basically the idea is that it's protective. It has spiritual powers of being able to protect you. So when a formula is called the jade screen, uh, headed up by astragalus, the idea is that this is the immune uh, tonic to prevent any you're getting any kind of contagion or pathogens from your environment. It's like putting a jade screen around between you and all of the negative pathogens that are likely to come to you. So it's especially something that you take between acute bouts. In other words, you don't take it necessarily during the course of a fever or cold, because its nature is to warm metabolism. If you have uh, a good balanced heat internally in your body, then it keeps the cold, which means the negative influences from the outside from penetrating. So the idea is that this formula strengthens the Wei Qi, which is the periphery, the immune system of the body, and so it's especially useful taken during the winter season. I can't even imagine taking it during the summer. But if you feel like there's contagion around you, whether it's whooping cough or other kinds of diseases, and you want to get an edge in terms of protecting you without having without resorting to vaccinations, jade screen is the closest that you're going to get in the herbal world, and it's a formula that's made up of three herbs. And so, anyway, next slide. move it along. Are you there?
I guess there's a long delay.
Okay.
Yeah,
So anyway,
there's a long delay between the slides.
recognizing how important this is and how useful it is to everybody, I had authorized putting it into a planetary formula so it's available as a delicious extract, liquid extract that we even I think even have it flavored, or in a tablet form like this. And it's something that you can take every day, especially during cold and flu season. Okay, going on.
All right, this one's you too.
I've had
Chop and crush.
I've had children, for instance, come to me in my clinic who had problems that they were getting colds every week. Every week is like, and I know that Rosalie said that this is something you can take a long time, but when an herbal formula is really indicated, its results can be really astonishing, really quick. And in this case, I gave Jade Screen during the course of the first week. Now, this kid that I'm thinking about was getting colds every week. And this was over a year, just repeatedly susceptible to colds. As soon as they started taking Jade Screen, they stopped getting them. So it's really a valuable formula. In Ayurveda, because I teach planetary herbology, I try to emphasize using herbs from all of the three great traditions: Western, Chinese, and Indian Ayurvedic systems. These are the oldest systems in the world. The formula for building up immunity and strength and powerful antioxidant formula is called Shayavan Prash. And as you can see, there's many different brands on the market of Shayavan Prash. And these are four that I know, and I've used the first three. I've never used the fourth one there, but the organic Shayavan Prash, the first one is available on Amazon.com. I like Pras very much. It's quite fruity and delicious. And the berry that you're seeing is called amla, which is the major ingredient in Shayavan Prash. Is actually anywhere from 30 to 50 herbs or more in this formula, and basically it's like a jam or jelly form. I'm crazy, but I think it's quite delicious. It's something you could spread on toast if you wanted to. Um, Typically, it's used like Ovaltine. You stir it into a glass of warm milk, and it enhances the absorption of the nutrients of the milk, and the herbs together make it even more powerful. So amla is one of the great herbs in the world, and it grows on a tree. And I've been trying to inspire people to try to get this tree growing in tropical and areas of this country. Florida would be a good place to be growing amla trees, and because I think it has tremendous economic value. And so this is it. Amla has like the highest known source of vitamin C of just about any vegetable or fruit known, but its special attribute is that the vitamin C does not get depleted with either heat or aging. Now, Shayavan Prash is really cooked a long, long time. If you can imagine all these herbs in it, and then there's honey, and then there's sugar to help deliver it, and then there's ghee, which is butter. It's quite tasty. But the amla is still full potency. So this is like a full herbal antioxidant and a formula to help build up all of the different tissues of the body. Okay.
Great. All right, so now we're getting into the thick of it, and we're going to talk about coughs and mucus here, and basically how there's different types of coughs. We have expectorant coughs, and these are coughs that will produce mucus from the lungs. There are non-productive coughs, meaning that they don't produce any mucus, but mucus could be stuck in the lungs, for example. There could be dry spasmodic coughing. So this is very scant mucus and then this rhythmic or spasmodic coughing. This is what we most commonly see, at least in the second stage of whooping cough. A couple notes on mucus: that thick and yellow phlegm indicates heat and infection, and the white phlegm signifies coldness.
Yep, and the dry spasmodic
Michael, do you
coughing.
want me to do this slide or do you want to do this?
Which one? Oh, go ahead. I was going to comment on the previous one. That's all right. We'll go on.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Okay.
Yeah, the
So
idea.
mucus, it's a naturally occurring fluid.
Don't go ahead, Rosalie.
Go ahead, Michael. I think there's a delay here. Okay. We could play
Okay.
like rock, paper, scissors for it or something, but
Yeah,
okay. So I'll just go ahead. So we've got naturally occurring fluid. It's secreted by the mucous membranes. It lines the lungs, nasal passages, um, consists of proteins, antimicrobial enzymes, which is really important. Mucus is a very important part of the immune system, as well as antibodies and salt. Normally it's thin and clear, and when we see excess mucus in the body, it's an indication of incomplete digestion of food, sometimes caused by what we might say is cold digestion. So there's three main functions of mucus, and that's to moisten tissues, to prevent infection, and also to attack the pathogens causing infections. So when do we use herbs to treat mucus? Well, we use herbal expectorants, and these are used to help dissolve and eliminate excess infective mucus. So when there's congestion in the lungs, for example, um, many of the herbs that we're going to talk about in later slides will possess these properties. Herbal stimulants and carminatives. These are, again, for addressing digestive mucus, which is where mucus is first generated. Herbal demulcents, sometimes called relaxing expectorants, they can lubricate and help supply good quality and non-infective mucus, and they can help relieve irritation and dryness as well. So one thing when we're talking about whooping cough, it's kind of an interesting thing because and at the East West School of Herbology was how to treat the person and not the disease. And I was talking about this with Michael today, and he said, well, maybe a better way of saying that actually is we want to treat the person who has the disease. So it's not like somebody comes to you and they have whooping cough, and you say, well, how's your sleep? How's your stress? Well, let's address your sleep and your stress. Whereas this person is dealing with this really acute manifestation of whooping cough, which is probably adding to their sleep troubles and stress troubles. But more what I mean by this is, of course, we want to treat the acute problems that this person is having, and but instead of concentrating on this diagnosis of whooping cough or pertussis, we're going to evaluate the individual and specifically look at the symptoms that that person is having. So instead of thinking of what herbs are good for whooping cough, we can instead think of what phase is this person in this whooping cough cascade of events, and how can we help this particular person who has the whooping cough. We can evaluate their strength or vitality of the person as well, which would help us decide, what herbs to choose and how to put together a protocol for them. So I just want to put that out there in terms of, let's again, not only should we think about, um, how do I want to say that? Well, basically, I want to say is, it is not legal for us as unlicensed health people, herbalists, to say that we are treating whooping cough or that we're curing whooping cough. And I've been working a lot in my community. I live in a small community. I taught this same class in the community, and I decided to um, preempt any problems. And when I announced the class, I also sent out letters to all of the doctors in the area, all of the naturopaths in the area, and just told them who I was and what my objectives were, and made it very clear that I was not treating or curing whooping cough. And instead, how we get around that is we could look at traditional Chinese medicine patterns within whooping cough, or understand it from a Western perspective of tissue states, which we'll talk about now. So in general, there's three phases, or three different kind of ways that people go through the whooping cough. And phase one, which we talked about earlier, is basically a mild upper respiratory symptoms. It looks like they have a little cold. It would fall under external wind cold symptoms from a traditional Chinese medicine perspective. This stage of the game, a lot of times people don't know they have whooping cough at this stage of the game. With the epidemic here in the valley, people were very aware the whooping cough was making the headlines for every newspaper, so people were very aware of it. So every little sniffle, people were getting pretty concerned that they had whooping cough. But most of the time, people don't know that they have whooping cough at this stage, unless they know they've been, exposed to it, and then they start to get these symptoms. But in this stage of the game, we often want to use stimulating expectorants, carminative, and also stimulating diaphoretics.
Yeah, and keep in
Phase
mind
two, so this is a
any herb that has a strong spicy taste or smell basically possesses an antibacterial property because those volatile oils are the oils that the plant uses to protect itself from bacteria. So uh, the use of for instance, in Ayurveda, ginger, black pepper, pippli long pepper. In Western herbalism, there's a great deal of use of cayenne pepper. All of these things have the ability to help fight off pathogens in the body. So uh, it's not just simply expectorants and carminatives and diaphoretics, but actually things that have antibiotic and antiviral properties. And phase two, the
yeah, certainly.
uncontrollable dry coughing and dry lung condition, doesn't mean that you're really lacking in mucus all the time. It means that the mucus it may be congealed because there's been so much heat in the battle and the struggle that the body is going through to fight the onslaught of the pathogen that it literally cooks the normal mucus in your body and makes it congeal. And so it's important then to use these expectorant and spicy herbs to help thin out the mucus. And sugar is also used as a uh, uh, catalyst for that because it also helps to thin the mucus. So it's a whole concept that I think is probably not clearly understood by Western herbalists, but it certainly is important. And we all know that taking cough syrup is helpful because that's in a sugar base, as an example. Go ahead.
Okay, so with this second phase, as Michael mentioned, we're working to moisten the lungs, antispasmodics to quell the coughing, and as well, stimulating expectorants can also be important since we're talking about thinning the mucus. Then phase three is recovery. People can be in phase two for months at a time. And you can imagine all of that incessant coughing and it's oftentimes it's not continuous coughing, but it'll happen. They'll go through a coughing fit, and then might be a couple hours. They'll have another coughing fit, but they are quite incredible in terms of their strength, and that's doing a lot of taking its toll on lung tissue. So recovery is really important in terms of healing the lung tissues.
Yeah, what's unique about whooping cough is basically the paroxysms of coughing are so continuous that a person has a hard time catching a breath. And so, you're coughing so much and it's happening so often in sequence that when you try to catch a breath, there's kind of a whooping sound. Now, this can be so bad that it can look really bad, and it is a bad experience where a small child will turn blue and maybe even vomit, and just because they're of a deprivation of oxygen, and so it's important to find ways to alleviate that situation. And quite frankly, there really isn't anything in Western medicine that really does it as good as herbs. So while the question of curing something and taking something and getting over it overnight maybe a long shot, if at all possible, the idea is that we need to be able to manage these things effectively so that there's the least amount of damage that's done, and this is where herbs play a huge role.
Absolutely. I've been working with families who they've gone to the doctor and they've been given codeine type cough syrups for their young children, and a lot of them have used that and then heard about using herbs and that the herbs were a lot more effective than the codeine cough syrups. And that, has been my experience. I'll work with families who've been taking the codeine, it's not working. I'll start working with them, and I'll get the call from them the next day, and they say, that's the first night that my little girl didn't vomit from coughing so hard, or it was the first night that my little boy slept, the majority of the night. So It is a shame that herbs aren't more popular for this particular um, manifestation, just because they have, in my experience of seeing people not doing so well on the, Western medicine for the coughing and seeing herbs excel at it. Everybody who does contract this contagion could really benefit from these and help quell their symptoms a lot earlier.
Yeah, interesting thing that I came across
All right, so
recently.
we're going to talk about.
Interesting thing I came across recently is the use of fir tree needles, which studies were done in India that seem to indicate that fir tree needles taken in a dried and taken in a powder form is almost as effective as codeine. As a matter of fact, I think the study said it was as effective as codeine in treating lung infections and coughing. It's a key ingredient in Ayurveda for treating lung infections.
Great, we have a slide on that a little bit later as well.
Oh, I
All
didn't
right,
know
so herbal
that.
expectorants. Yeah, you made it.
Okay.
Um, so we have herbal expectorants, and we've talked about them already. So these are also antimicrobial most of the time, and we use them when there's congested mucus in the lungs or stuck mucus in the lungs. Um, we have Thymus vulgaris, and this is a very old remedy, very effective one that's often recommended specifically for whooping cough. It's antimicrobial, so it can act directly against the pathogen. It's stimulants written on there twice, but it's stimulating expectorant, so it helps thin the mucus. Also promotes digestion as well. Works great as a tea. It's quite pleasant tasting. Can be powdered, crushed with garlic, put it in honey or olive oil. I guess this is your slide, Michael, and I just talked over your slide. Do you
Oh,
want to add anything to it?
that's okay. I think you did real well. Let's just go on.
All right. So bee balm is one of my favorites in
Yeah, that's
terms of
what I
the
want to learn about.
stimulating diaphoretic antimicrobial. Yeah, so this I just think it's so cool. It's native to North America. It's
Uh-huh.
actually endemic here, meaning it only grows here, and the taste is very similar to oregano and thyme. Has a lot of the same volatile oils that are found in oregano and thyme. It's very spicy. It can be used as a culinary spice, and it also works really wonderful as medicine. It's used for infections all over the place. Can treat both bacterial infections, fungal infections, stimulating diaphoretic. And one reason I love this is it grows really easy. It's a mint family, and it grows really easily in the garden. And I started mine from seed. And last year, I've been growing it for a couple years, but last year, the it grows into this big bush, and it was as tall as I was. And just one, bush of this plant supplies all the bee balm that I need for myself, my family, as well as the people I work with here in the valley where I live. So it's just very proliferant. I love thyme too, but my thyme plant is pretty small and it'll always be small, whereas my bee balm is quite huge and it's just so beautiful and the bees love it and it's just a really, really fun plant. So you can take it as a tea, oxymel. I have recipes for an oxymel, I believe, on my blog. Infuse it in honey, use it externally as a poultice. Tincture works great in many different ways. Garlic, of course, this is one I love because, when I get calls from parents who are dealing with colds and flu specifically, and they're calling me at 9 o'clock at night and they want something for little Johnny, and they might not have bee balm in their medicine cabinet, but most people have garlic. So it negatively affects bacteria, viruses, worms, parasites, fungi. You take it internally to tolerance. If you take too much of it too fast, it is emetic, which means it'll make you puke. So you got to be slow with that. And how I generally recommend is people mix it with a fat like ghee or butter or olive oil. If they can tolerate gluten, they can have it on bread. But that, eating it with the fat kind of helps buffer some of those nauseating effects. You can also infuse it into honey, which is very nice and can help entice the kids to eat it. Um, you can use it topically, but it can cause burning for some people. I generally recommend that people infuse it in oil for a time and then strain off the oil and use that topically. And that can help specifically with lung affections.
Yep.
So this is
Somebody
my
asked
full
about
slide. You
garlic.
want me to talk over?
Uh, Somebody asked about garlic earlier, and I just wanted to say that there's two ways of using garlic. One is to macerate it in honey. The other is to macerate it in olive oil. So the olive oil is particularly good when you can't give honey, like to small children from 2 years and younger. You can't really give honey because there's some danger of pathogens being transferred to them. Uh, but the Italian way of just taking a lot of garlic and crushing it in olive oil and then taking some bread and just dipping it in and eating it is quite tasty. And as Culpepper says, garlic will cure all the diseases except the one that it causes, which we all know is what that one is: bad breath. But throughout any protocol of treating coughs, whooping coughs, or flu, or any of those things, uh, regardless of any other herbs that you're taking, garlic should be taken along with it. And I would say hourly, every 2 hours, uh, and taken in the way that I mentioned, either a teaspoon with garlic or dipping some bread in garlic and olive oil and just eating it every hour, just saturating your system with it. Garlic has and onions both have potent antibiotic properties, but the garlic is stronger. All right.
All right, and we've got Ginger up next.
Yeah, there's a mother here who spoke of. Uh, she's now had 3 years. A now 3-year-old unvaccinated child enrolled but active with East West Herb Course, uh, but not active with the course. She said that her toddler had a dry cough that sounded like a barking dog, and he seemed to have trouble breathing. And she had nothing else, and no insurance. So she quickly cooked up upa honey based on syrup of ginger and garlic, fennel, black peppercorn, cloves, and by morning the cough was gone. So that's the kind of herbalism that I like to see people learning and just getting in, just doing it. Saturate your system with it. This is one of my favorite herbs here. I can't imagine being without ginger, and especially for young children because they like it. If you give them the first sign of any kind of mucus that young kids get, which are oftentimes the first sign of a cold or an acute disease coming on, we would always give our kids a tea made by putting a few slices of ginger in hot water and honey, and they readily take it. They like it. It's like ginger ale. So this is something that I think should be part of the standard protocol for any acute disease like this. And for coughs, ginger is one of the very best herbs you can use.
Great. All right, so moving on to demulcent herbs for coughs. So demulcents help lubricate and help supply good quality of non-infective mucus. Indications are for dry, irritated mucous membranes. One of our kind of the queen of demulcent herbs is marshmallow root or Althea officinalis, and the roots contain an abundance of mucilage, but as do the leaves and flowers. And so it's great for all sorts of inflamed surfaces, such as coughs, like we'll be talking about, and also a yin nourishing herb. Common mallow, which probably grows in a garden near you, um, is can be used in a very similar way, and you can use the whole plant there. Slippery elm is another one of our super demulcent herbs. We use the inner bark, and it's wonderful, relaxing expectorant or demulcent for the lungs. It's also an easy to digest food. One thing to note, though, with slippery elm is that it's on the United Plant Savers at-risk list. So we only want to buy from cultivated sources. Also, a good thing to mention is that other elms like Siberian elm, Ulmus pumila, can be used similarly to the slippery elm. And I mentioned it's really important to get cultivated sources. And this is New York Times. This is makes the headlines almost every year, where people go into national forests where there's still some stands of slippery elm left, and slippery elm has fallen prey to Dutch elm disease as well as habitat loss, which is why is that it's an it's a at-risk list from UPS. And but every year people go into these national forests and they just strip the bark completely bare. There are ways to cultivate it in a more sustainable way, but that's not being done here because people are just trying to go for the money, and it can fetch a lot of money on the herbal market. So really important to get them from a cultivated source. Licorice root's one of our other demulcents, and it's also antispasmodic. Great for abating a cough. It moistens the lungs. It also can relieve a sore throat, as can all of these ones that we're talking about. I'm going to skip over some of this just because we need to get moving on here, but licorice root, great herb to know about. So this is the tea blend that I've been recommending, and we'll go over my specific protocols here pretty soon, but this is what I've been recommending to families. So far, I've been mainly working with children, and so whenever you work with children, taste is always an issue. And so this is what I've been this is what I've been recommending for people to take during the day, and that's a quarter cup of linden, 1/8 cup of marshmallow roots, and 2 teaspoons of lemon balm leaves. Lemon balm is in there not only for taste, but also has some antispasmodic properties as well. So you just make a long tea out of those. So I tell people to steep it for 30 minutes, and then they can flavor with honey if they need to. These are very nourishing, demulcent teas, so emphasis is on getting enough. And every kid that I've recommended it so far has enjoyed it, and it's gone down pretty fine. So I recommend these for during the day to help with that dryness, and also can help relieve sore throat as well. A lot of the families I've been working with, I didn't tell them to do this, but they went on their own and they made popsicles out of it, and it seemed that helped get it in to the kids better. So popsicles are an option. All right, so we've moistened the lungs, we've expectorated the lungs. Now we're looking at stopping the coughing. So antispasmodic herbs can stop the coughing reflex. And again, this whooping cough, people go into these intense coughing fits where they have a difficulty breathing and might end in vomiting. It can keep it. These coughing fits are worse at night. They typically happen more frequently, and they can just keep the whole family up with this coughing, which, not getting the rest you need, of course, has its own problems with illness. So we use these, when there's these instances where the coughing is severe and it's this dry spasmodic coughing. So I believe that I first learned about California poppy for whooping cough from herbalist Howie Brownstein, and that's my #1 herb that I've been recommending for families, and it's been working really well. And it was also great to be able to have this herb because it's carried, I've been recommending it as a tincture, and it's carried in the local health food store, and so people call me, desperate, they need something that day, and California poppy is in stock. So this is a poppy, it's native to the west coast of North America. It is a relaxing nervine. It's used not just for quelling incessant coughing, but also for helping people sleep at night, so it's a nice one for that. It's safe for children, but it works very well for adults as well. So I've been recommending this as a tincture, alcohol extracts, and the great thing about alcohol extracts in this case is that they're very fast acting, and it's low liquid consumption at night. Of course, you don't want to be taking lots and lots of teas. And I think the trick to any whooping cough protocol when we're looking at antispasmodic herbs is what's critical is the dose. And so I really walk people through this. Most people I'm working with are not herbalists. They're just, desperate families. So I really have to hold people's hand with this. But basically what I recommend is they start with a low dose, and you can look up general dosages for children depending on what age of the child, or even adult. This works for adults too. But basically start with a low dose. Let's just make up some numbers. Let's say you start with 10 drops of California poppy. I generally recommend people put this in water. Some people have been putting it in elderberry syrup, but you want to dilute it a bit. And what you want to do is, people have a coughing fit, you give them 10 drops. You see how they do. If they keep coughing, what you want to do is you want to keep increasing that dose until you find out at what dose do they stop coughing. And then in the future, you use that dose for that individual. And so that's really key. So I think, And this is so true for so many different herbs and how we would use herbs. I really like this method of titrating up to find what works for you. This is something where you can really see it work well. And I've been working with other families who do know something about herbs, and they tell me, "Oh, I'm taking this cough, formula, and it's actually a pretty good cough formula and something I would recommend." But they're just taking too low of dosages of it. So that's really the key to success here, I think, is getting enough. I also I've been recommending people use Lobelia inflata. This is a low dose botanical, so you use much lower dosages than you would something like California poppy. If you take too much of it too quickly, it's emetic, so it'll make you throw up. But I say that not to make people afraid of it, just to use it responsibly. But I recommend people, start with one drop there and then, do the same thing where they steadily increase dosages. So start with one drop and then increase and drop. So then try 2 drops, then try 3 drops, and increase until they get what they're looking for. And I've been having people combine it with California poppy, so not just the lobelia. And one thing about this, of course, is cost. And I had one family talk to about the cost of herbs, and it was costing them a lot of money. But I guess what I had said about the lobelia had kind of scared them off because they were afraid of the vomiting. And so they were just using California poppy, and they were going through a lot of it pretty quickly. They had 3 children with whooping cough in the household. But so I had her, I talked her into adding the lobelia, and you can actually, when you add the lobelia with the California poppy, you can use a lot less of the California poppy as well.
This must be
So that is also an extract.
it must be pretty nasty tasting, right? Combination.
The lobelia has this kind of acrid
Oh
taste
yeah,
to it.
I know
But,
lobelia
again,
well.
that's right.
but
Um,
but
but
California poppy's bitter. So you put the two together,
yeah, it is a little bit bitter.
you
Yeah,
have
so
quite.
families, they've been mixing this in with elderberry syrup, for example. So I'll mix it with a tablespoon of elderberry syrup and mix it together and give it to them like that. And that seems to be a pretty successful way to do it. And we'll talk about elderberry syrup in a lot. Looks like I already talked about this slide in terms of starting with the drop and then slowly increasing. And so those just happen to be the 2 herbs that I've been working with most for this particular whooping cough that we're going through in the valley. But there's so many different options out there, so many different antispasmodic herbs: valerian, cramp bark, wild cherry bark, wild lettuce. I'm sure all of these work really well. This just happened to be what I got fixated on, and it seems to be working really well. We'll talk about my specific protocols in a moment, but I'm sure any of these would be great if you felt called to work towards them. I would just say the most critical thing is making sure you get the best dosage, which to me means, the most therapeutic effect without unwanted side effects. All right, here we are, specific protocols. It looks like my clock is saying we have 10 minutes left. So Michael, we might go through these specific protocols and then skip to the end.
Okay.
Um, we thought we might run out of time here. So what I've been recommending is a 2-part approach. So I recommend the demulcent teas during the day. So as a reminder, that's the linden, marshmallow, lemon balm tea. So drink that throughout the day. And then antispasmodic tinctures at night or as needed during the day. Most people seem to have the most problems at night, though. So this nighttime coughing, using an antispasmodic blend, like I mentioned, the California poppy and the lobelia, but again, it could be, any blend of your favorite antispasmodic herbs. And it doesn't just have to be antispasmodics too. We talked about the stimulating expectorants could be in there as well. But basically titrating up the dose as well. And then I also recommend the ginger compress, and that seems to be very helpful. So I asked in the American Herbalist Guild forum or Facebook uh, group page, I asked if people had any clinical pearls to share, and Carolyn Gagnon, who's a herbalist in Quebecois herbalist, she said that when her own daughter had whooping cough, she used a ginger compress. I thought that was interesting, and I started recommending that. And several of the families I worked with found this really helpful, especially for young kids who didn't want to be constantly taking more and more syrup or tinctures. So this is something that can be done, externally, and doesn't have to. You don't have to make them open the hatch if they want. So she just recommended the ginger roots, and I threw in cramp bark there for good measure, and it seems to be working quite well. So this is just a basic recipe. It could be modified and however you want. This is what the recipe I've been giving to families. And basically, you take those herbs, you simmer them for 20 minutes, you strain it, you allow it to cool somewhat, and then you put a washcloth in the tea blend. And you want to wring it out so it's just not dripping wet, but you still want, a good amount of that tea to be in the washcloth. And then basically you're just putting this on the chest. So of course you don't want it to be too hot, but at nice warm temperature. Then you put a dry towel over that. Then you can also place a hot water bottle over that. And when I say hot, I mean warm. Obviously, with young children, you don't want to overdo it. And I recommend that you keep checking the skin to make sure that it's not too hot or it's not reddening. So you have to play around a little bit with that, but that can be used on the chest or on the back. And I'm not exactly sure exact mechanism that's making this work. Ginger's anti-inflammatory, it's stimulating expectorant, antimicrobial. But I've had several families report back that they felt like that was a really crucial piece of this. So there's the demulcent teas during the day, antispasmodic herbs, and also this ginger compress has been working really well. I've been telling families, make this up in the daytime, and then so you just have to warm it up at night. And that still is kind of a bummer. Your child is coughing, possibly puking at midnight, and you have to make this thing. So it does take a little bit of work, but families have said it's quite helpful. Right, so this is one of Michael's specific formulas for open cough. You want to take over, Michael?
Yeah, this kind of puts the principles all together into one formula and one protocol. Thyme, ginger, marshmallow, and lobelia combination for whooping cough. Um, and you're going to see that we're using a significant amount of herbs, 2 ounces of each garden thyme and marshmallow root, and about 3 ounces of fresh sliced ginger or 1.5 ounces of dried ginger, and a quarter ounce of dried lobelia herb. And this is cooked in 1.5 quarts of distilled or pure water. Uh, and these are all boiled together and cooked down to a pint, which is a half a quart, and then it's strained and pressed out, usually through a linen cloth. You squeeze it all out. The marshmallow root makes things a little bit slimy, so you want to try to really get that slime into your solution. And then you return it to the tea, and then you dissolve 2 pounds of brown sugar in it, raw brown sugar, sucanat being the best, I think. And you bring it to a boil and you simmer it for another 5 minutes, skimming off the scum as it rises, and you add the fresh grated or sliced ginger at the end and let it steep until it's cool, and then you can take the ginger out. You can strain and bottle it and keep it in a cool place. And for young children, you can give 1 teaspoon as often as needed for cough troubles. In older children, you can give 2 to 3 teaspoonfuls according to age and tolerance. Adults can take a tablespoon every 2 or 3 hours. Now these are minimal doses. For infants, you might only want to give like a quarter teaspoon or half a teaspoon or something like that, based on what the child can tolerate. Uh, Mothers who are nursing their children should not stop nursing, because the mother's milk has all kinds of antibodies that help fight off acute disease, and it's especially a time when a mother's diet should be as pure and toxic free as possible, because anything that a mother eats, there's only one molecule that changes it from blood to milk. And so anything you eat, basically, you can just figure that your kid's going to get it. And so if you take the herbs, then it'll go in perfect dosage for your infant who's suckling.
All right, so I think gonna escape out of full screen here and skip ahead, just because we're running out of time. See here. Guess I'll start here and just go pretty quickly. So general support through the illness. I've mentioned the elderberry syrup. That can be a great medium for mixing in anything really. But elderberry syrup can be taken throughout the entire illness as well. And really easy way to make it is just 1 cup of dried elderberries, 2 cups of water, and make that into a syrup. Elder flowers can be great. I often recommend that for children and adults with upper respiratory infections. Can be taken throughout as well. Um, the recipe that I often recommend is a standard recipe for elderflowers, um, which includes elderflowers and mint leaves, and also to that as well. And this can be taken throughout the entire illness. And I apologize, I'm kind of going fast here, but we have a couple more slides. And a lot of these things you can look up. So I'm just mentioning them, but you can look them up. Pretty much all the families I've been working with have had a humidifier in the room with a person with whooping cough, and this helps to obviously add humidity to the air, which is nice for those that dry spasmodic coughing. Recovery, definitely want to mention this because I think this can be overlooked, but imagine those lungs have been taking quite a hit for a while, so we need full recovery. Rest, of course, is super important, and that can be really hard. I have one family who's really going above and beyond right now, and she's actually had to pull her kids out of school for several weeks because she just felt like they weren't ready to go back because the coughing was still troublesome for them. But it's really important. Nourishing foods is going to be really important throughout the entire illness as well as recovery. If the person goes on antibiotics, then probiotics and prebiotics, like we discussed, are going to be really important to help get a healthy gut flora going again. And what I've been specifically recommending for people is a mullein leaf infusion for recovery. Mullein leaf is so specific to the lungs, can help restore lung health. It also has some wonderful attributes that make it nice for whooping cough. It is slightly antispasmodic, moistening to the lungs, etc. And the special thing with this is, it's very light. The leaves are very light, so you can get about a half ounce into a quart jar. And the special thing, you let it sit for 48 hours, but then you want to strain it through a coffee filter because, as you can see from this picture, it just has all these tiny little hairs on it, which can be irritating. And mullein leaf is a very bland taste. It kind of has like a vanilla taste to it. It tastes pretty good. So children have been getting it down okay. All right, so want to give a special thank you to Michael. He put so much work
Well,
into these
I
slides,
got
and
one
we
more
actually
thing.
just skipped
I got
over a
one
bunch
more
of
thing
his
to add.
slides.
One more thing to add.
Okay.
Um, when I was a wee toddler or a school age kid, my mother used to load me up with Vicks and camphorated oil, which works a lot like the ginger compress, except that it allows you to not have to sit there and attend to it all night long. And basically, you get warm camphorated oil at a drugstore and Vicks Vapor Rub, and you rub that on the child's chest and back, and it's really a very effective way to get over a lot of issues like whooping cough and influenza and so forth. I remember I hated it, but it really made me get better usually within 3 days doing that. So that's a literally an old mother's tale that I think really works. So I wanted to recommend that.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, there's more that we missed over, but that was an hour and a half of a lot of information. And thanks
Yeah,
everyone for coming here. Thanks, Michael, for being a part of it. And I just want to, everyone gets to attend this completely for free, but this is not free on for Michael and the East West School of Herbology. It actually costs quite a lot of money to have this webinar program, this software program, and they foot the bill for that. So it's very nice of them to do that, and very nice of him to let me present webinars with the school and with Michael. It certainly has been my pleasure to be here, and I do have a couple of promotional things to announce, and then we'll answer questions that people have. And thanks for being here, and thanks for listening to the promos. We've given you an hour and a half of information, and we just have less than a minute of marketing. So it seems like that's a good trade-off. And the East West offers a really wonderful, comprehensive herbal training program. I'm totally biased because I went through it for 3 years and I absolutely loved it. And there's 36 lessons. So many amazing herbal books come with it, including the lesson books, which are really amazing in themselves. Then you get access to forums. We do other webinars that are just for students, chats, and more. And tuition for this 3-year program is usually $2,199, but I talked to Jill over at East West, who does a lot of the administrative work, and she says that they're going to do a special for this webinar. So It'll be $600 off of tuition, which makes it $1,599. And if you want to do this, you can enroll by June 7th. And but to get that special price, you need to mention this webinar. And you can do that by visiting Planet Herbs or by calling that number to enroll. I'll put that back up for you. This is Planet Herbs. This is Michael and Leslie's School of Herbology, and this is the home page. It's a screenshot of it. This is planetherbs.com. And a great thing to do is to sign up for their newsletter, and you can download a free sample lesson as well. And if you sign up on the newsletter, you'll hear about other webinars such as this one. And you can also download the free sample lesson, which is great too. So it gives you an idea of what the program's like. Again, I'm totally biased because I'm the administrator for the Facebook page for East West School of Herbology, and I post a couple things there every day, just interesting herbal tidbits. Sometimes we have plant quizzes and that sort of thing. So come find us on Facebook and like us there, and get infuse more herbal stuff into your life. And my personal announcement is that I wrote a book last fall on herbal remedies for children during the cold and flu season, and I just updated that to include a lot of the information that you saw presented here tonight, and it includes a lot more on whooping cough. It's 107 pages and includes all sorts of information on fevers, teething, congestion, lots of herbal monographs, kid-friendly recipes, and of course the whooping cough information as well. And that is going to be available until June 5th, and it's $12.99. And you can find that at my blog, which is metowvalleyherbs.blogspot.com. You'll see a tab there. It's highlighted with the yellow, Children's Cold and Flu ebook. And again, that is just available until June 5th. And you can find that at my blog. Even if you aren't interested in that book, you could also visit my blog to sign up for my newsletter. I send out a newsletter about once a month and let you know what I'm up to, articles I've written, webinars I'm participating in, and all sorts of information. And if you sign up for my newsletter, you also get a free 34-page ebook on the taste of herbs, which is another webinar series that Michael and I did together.
Yeah, we got a few of
Okay,
them
I just
now.
gave you tons of information, all these different things to do. So I
These are
thought
all
I'd leave you a little
these are not
summation of all the different things that
these are not commercials. They're opportunities. So I hope you see them that way. Um,
absolutely, absolutely. And we love doing these webinars. It's been really fun, and it's great to have everyone's support. And again, I appreciate people being here with us and supporting this. And I really hope this information serves you. And may you never have to deal with whooping cough. And if you
it's
do, may
horrible.
this be very helpful. So many different opportunities or different ways we can use herbs to help people through this process that really, really work and can really bring a lot of relief to families. So thanks very much. And I think we have some time now. If there's a couple of questions, Michael, or if you've been answering them all, or what do we want to do?
I've been
Questions?
trying to. There've been some good questions and good suggestions that people had. One woman, for instance, talked about the Ayurvedic valerian called Jadamamsi that she would use basically to stop nighttime coughing for her kid, and that's a great one. So valerian, would be another good herb for that purpose. But Jadamamsi is a lot smoother than the Western valerian. By the way, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to put up the some of the formulas and things that basically you didn't have time to copy down so quickly as we were going here. So give me a few days to have, and look to our website at planetherbs.com, and you can download that information for your uh, 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 notebook. And we'll see if this recording, which I was able to start somewhere as we got into the webinar, Rosalie. So we'll see if how it turns out, and if it's available, we'll try to make that available so you can listen to it again or have your friends check it out. Okay, so any questions that you might have? I've been answering any of them. I think I've got. Oh man, there's a whole bunch here. I don't think I can get to all of these, but there's a lot of thank yous. Would melon be good for chronic cough? Yeah, it's pretty good. Um, there's a lot of herbs we didn't mention because what we're doing is focusing on things that we would use or that we use clinically. So there are literally hundreds of herbs that would be applicable for this condition, but the ones that we would use are the ones that we're using in our clinic or in our firsthand experience, and that's the benefit of checking this out. Um, uh, what was the essential oil Michael mentioned? It was camphorated oil. I don't even know if drugstores still carry that stuff, but camphor is used in Chinese medicine. It's got tremendous antibacterial properties, and I remember having to go to school with wearing a little pouch of camphor on my uh, undershirt to protect from airborne pathogens. And Leslie, my wife's mother, back in the early part of the 20th century, people used to wear little pouches of asafoetida, which makes you stink pretty badly, but nevertheless, it was very effective in keeping pathogens and protecting you from catching these things. So I think it's good to revive some of these things. Crushed garlic is also used in some cultures. So camphorated oil is not an essential oil. I don't think. I think it's basically an oil in which camphor has been melted. Um, yes, Vicks and onion pull compresses. That's a good idea. Big thank you. Enjoying a webinar. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, leave it to Richie to ask the tough questions. She's an herbalist and a student of the course. Maybe I don't know. Maybe you're a graduate. I don't recall. But in any case, uh, whooping cough and on immunosuppressants, except for the tonics, nothing that we're giving here are immuno would interfere with immunosuppressants. Things like ginger and thyme and stuff like that. The question of whether to use things like uh, astragalus or uh, reishi mushroom, those are questions I think that need to be gotten into more deeply. And I'm clinically I might still use them, but I couldn't blanketly say yes they're safe to use. Okay. Oh, Sarah Washington asks about anything to support the heart with all that coffee and hawthorn. Yeah, I suppose you could do that. I mean, basically, we're going to assume that this is an acute disease, and when people get over it, they're stronger than they were when they got into it, and that's usually the case. So, but if you feel like you want to give hawthorn to help strengthen the heart, I think it's a good idea. Any experience with wild yam as an antispasmodic for cough? No, I don't have any experience with that. What about horehound candy? We used to get that. Yeah, that's okay. You have to use a lot of sugar in it, and as we said earlier, sugar is a carrier that helps to liquefy mucus. So when you have something horribly, horribly bitter like that, that no self-respecting germ or virus would like to live in, and you bait it, said, "Come over here, I got all this sugar for you guys. So come on," and then you drown it with this horribly bitter herb, which is horehound. Oh yeah, it's a good strategy. And fresh lemon, ginger, and honey is like a standby in my house also. Um, and Tamara healed all 5 kids with lemon, ginger, and honey. It's a good way to go. If we'll see if this uh, presentation records, and if so, we'll try to have it available on our website. And I think that's all we're going to do right now. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and stay tuned for in the future. We'll have more webinars like this and timely topics that I hope you'll find useful. And good night.
Good night, everyone. Thanks for joining us.